Chapter 20, Unexpected Delay. Nick arrived at London King's Cross Station via the Victoria Line, the underground tunnels buzzing with the low hum of footsteps and the sharp crackle of distant announcements. The walls gleamed with sterile tiles, old grime lurking in the cracks, where the light didn't quite reach. A busker's guitar echoed faintly somewhere down the concourse, drowned out by the rush of commuters weaving around one another like currents in a river. As he followed the brightly lit corridor that sloped toward the surface, anticipation simmered in his chest. Connor, his best friend. The thought of reuniting with him should have been enough to sweep aside the shadows. For a moment, Nick allowed himself to picture Connor's grin, the way his blue hair seemed to defy gravity, and the comfort of slipping back into the effortless banter they'd always shared. But excitement could only go so far. Beneath it lay something heavier, a darker obsession that had taken root the moment he first raised his arm, shouted Zeus, and felt the Mark IV armor lock around him. The city wasn't just a place anymore. It was a battlefield, a chessboard of predators and prey, and he couldn't walk through it without imagining the invisible hands pulling strings in its shadows. He reached into his pocket, drew out his phone, and with a few swipes, opened the citywide criminal intelligence database. An encrypted archive William's clearance had given him access to. He wasn't scrolling for curiosity's sake. These weren't just names on a screen. Each profile was a threat waiting to materialize, each photograph a reminder that London's chaos was manufactured, fed, and weaponized by men who profited from suffering. If he was going to defend the innocent, he had to know the predators first. The first name that caught his eye, Tom Cadby. Cadby's face glared out of the dossier, a mugshot that radiated arrogance. A known trafficker of the synthetic enhancer Adonis, Cadby was more than just a dealer. He was a linchpin of the Lost, the gang that had already left its scars on Nick's life. Ben Redding's rampage hadn't been random. The manic strength, the unhinged rage, the way Redding seemed half human, half animal, it all traced back to Adonis. And behind Adonis, men like Cadby. He wasn't a street hustler, he was an architect of addiction, building empires from desperation and bones. The file listed 6 suspected murders, none proven, all dismissed as gang rivalry. Nick knew better. He didn't care who bled, as long as the credits kept flowing. Nick forced himself to move on, scrolling to the next profile. A J. Kolosinski. The name alone carried a chill. A former soldier of Krovnia, the war-torn state carved from Lithuania's ruins during the Grand War, Kolosinski had been whispered about in barracks and refugee camps alike. The Butcher of Dinava. His crimes weren't battlefield necessity, they were horror theatre. Skinned prisoners, mutilations, women and children among his victims. Not sadism born in rage, but cold, deliberate ritual. He had vanished when the war ended, slipping into the underworld like a phantom, and now rumours placed him here, in London, wearing a false name, blending into the crowd. The Global Coalition for Peace and Prosperity had put a $10 million bounty on his head, alive, not dead. The world wanted his secrets, his testimony, the paper trail of orders he had followed. Families wanted justice, closure, something to cling to after decades of silence. Nick's chest tightened, his blood hot. Monsters like Kolosinski didn't deserve to breathe free air. They didn't deserve a second life. And then came the last name, one that stopped him cold. Cormac Maguire. The screen showed a weathered man with storm-grey eyes, the kind that belonged to someone who had stared too long at battlefields. A former bomb disposal expert turned saboteur, Maguire had once been celebrated as a national hero in Ireland, a man who had risked his life disarming explosives to save others. But history had a way of souring its heroes. When the Rose Empire annexed Ireland, Maguire turned radical, convinced that the promises of the crown were a hollow leash. He joined the Five-Leaf Clovers, their resistance sharp and bloody, and from there drifted further into shadow, into the orbit of Thanatos himself, Nick's jaw locked. The Black Death, Thanatos's terror network, was the same force that had orchestrated the attack that killed his parents. Maguire might not have carried the gun, but he had built the bombs, armed the hands, cleared the path. He was complicit. He was part of the machine that had taken everything from him. And yet, Nick didn't want simple revenge. He wanted truth, answers, proof. Every thread that tied back to Thanatos mattered. If interrogating Maguire could unravel even a corner of that web, then Nick would follow it, no matter the cost. Still, he forced himself to breathe, to pull back. Not yet. He was only 15. His armour, as advanced as it was, could only take him so far. His training, his discipline, his will, they had to grow sharper. The Black Death buried their enemies with precision, and if he rushed headlong into their world now, he'd end up as nothing more than another casualty. Nick reached the escalator that carried him up to the surface of St. Pancras International Station, feeling the steady hum of life vibrating through the steel beneath his feet. The moving steps lifted him out of the subterranean gloom and into a world awash with motion and noise. Glass ceilings arched high above, catching the weak daylight and scattering it across the concourse like shards of fractured hope. He adjusted his jacket collar, the chill from the winter air clinging to him even indoors. As he emerged, he veered right, boots clicking against the polished floor, and crossed into the adjoining heart of King's Cross Station. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Here, the space seemed to breathe faster, charged with the kinetic rhythm of departure and arrival. A throng of travellers moved like restless currents, some darting past ticket booths in frantic bids to catch departing trains, others drifting leisurely through shops and kiosks as though immune to the urgency pressing in on all sides. On the mezzanine level, diners leaned over plates of steaming food, laughter, and clinking cutlery, drifting down like echoes of another, calmer world. The air itself was an intoxicating blend of scents. Rich coffee pulling from one corner, sizzling meats from another, baked pastries wafting like temptation, all folding into the acrid undertone of diesel that lingered near the tracks. Overhead, the chime of intercom announcements rang out in clipped tones, cutting through the murmurs of conversation and the trundle of rolling suitcases. Nick tilted his head up at the great arrivals board, the display shifting in endless cycles of names and numbers, each flicker announcing comings and goings with mechanical certainty. His eyes traced the lines out of habit, though his thoughts were elsewhere. Scattered through the crowd, soldiers from the Xerxes Security Division stood with rifles slung and helmets gleaming. Their armour bore the matte black finish of authority, visors alive with faint digital glows. They were meant to be reassuring, a sign of order, but to Nick they felt like statues looming in judgment. Every so often their heads turned, scanning, recalibrating. A reminder, London never truly let its guard down, Not since the Black Death. Not ever again. Yet most people here weren't thinking about threats. They were thinking about escape. Suitcases clicked across the floor, handbags clutched tightly, shoulders hunched forward with the impatience of people already living in the next city, the next moment. Glitter still clung to the hair and eyelids of some, remnants of celebrations not yet shaken off. Others slouched on benches or against cold walls, nursing paper cups of coffee with half-lidded eyes, fighting off the weight of hangovers. Nick pulled out his phone and flicked the screen awake. He tapped a quick message. "You on your way?" Seconds later, Connor's reply appeared. "My train is at 12 o'clock and will take 50 minutes to get to London." Nick's lips curved into a faint smile, typical Connor, precise, but still casual, as if time bent around him instead of the other way around. That gave Nick just over an hour to fill, long enough to feel the itch of restlessness. His stomach growled, loud enough that the woman passing by glanced his way before disappearing into the crowd. He exhaled a sheepish chuckle. Food first. He drifted toward a brightly lit mini-grocer tucked along one of the concourse walls. Fluorescent strips buzzed overhead, casting shelves of crisps, bottles, and snack packs in harsh clarity. The colours almost hurt the eyes, but the familiarity was grounding. He reached for a bottle of Fizz Whiz, the apple-flavoured kind, always his choice. The cap hissed when he cracked it open, and the first fizzy kick against his tongue was sharp, sweet, and nostalgic. A bakery kiosk nearby drew him in next, its heated displays glowing like treasure chests of golden indulgence. Custard tarts, cheese twists, bacon baps. Each one promised comfort, but it was the sausage rolls that snagged him. Thick, flaky, and still steaming, their buttery scent filled the air. He ordered one, the heat bleeding through the paper as the vendor slid it across. Snack in hand, Nick scanned the departure hall until he found a vacant metal bench. The seat was cold, biting through the fabric of his trousers, but the warm pastry in his grip more than balanced it out. He unwrapped it slowly, almost reverently, letting the smell wash over him. It was a memory in itself, school trips, bus stops in Biggleswade, drizzly afternoons waiting for his mum to finish shifts at the hospital. A taste of simpler days, when comfort came wrapped in paper and hunger could be solved with something as unassuming as a sausage roll. The pastry crunched beneath his teeth, flaking apart to reveal juicy, pepper-laced sausage. He took his time, savouring it, while his eyes flicked back to the scrolling board above. Each line of shifting destinations felt like the heartbeat of the city. Around him, life moved in controlled chaos. Voices rose and fell. The tannoy crackled another announcement. A child's laughter pierced the din, followed by the exasperated call of a parent. For once, Nick allowed himself a rare moment of peace. Alone, but not lonely. A boy waiting for his best friend. A protector gathering strength in silence. As Nick downed the last of his Fizz Whiz, the fizz tickling his throat, the familiar clatter of foot traffic swelled and ebbed around him. Suitcases rattled across polished tiles. Children's laughter spiked, then was hushed, and the tannoy bleated its usual reminders about unattended baggage. Yet threading through all of it came another sound, the commanding voice of Luke Grant. his voice cut from the station's speakers with that polished cadence that had made him a household name, firm, precise, unwavering. The EMD news bulletin wasn't just background noise. It rolled across the concourse like a call to order, every syllable demanding attention. Even those rushing toward platforms slowed, ears tugged toward the familiar anchor, whose words carried the weight of both comfort and dread. The headline was one Nick had dreaded and expected in equal measure: Zeus. Grant's tone sharpened as he spoke of the city's obsession, its feverish speculation. The masked vigilante who became an overnight sensation. Clips rolled on the nearby screen, phone footage of silver armour flashing in the night, blurred glimpses of Zeus fighting Ben Redding. Commentators appeared in split screen, their faces animated with fervour. Was Zeus justice incarnate, or a dangerous vigilante skirting the line of tyranny? Nick sat frozen, the sausage roll paper still in his hand, watching the story of himself dissected and debated. Each word was a mirror and a blade. He was out there risking everything to protect people, yet here he was reduced to a headline, half hero, half threat. Then came the inevitable mention of Midas Industries. Though speculation continues, Midas Industries has declined to comment on rumours of their involvement with the vigilante known as Zeus, Grant intoned. The denial by silence only fanned the flames. Conspiracy forums, Grant noted, were spiralling into overdrive. The camera cut to a slick montage of digital feeds, glowing red circles around William Stenhouse's likeness. Anonymous posters accusing him of arming a ghost. Nick felt his stomach knot. Every word tightened the net. If the wrong person connected the dots, his secret wouldn't just be speculation, it would be truth. But then the bulletin shifted. Grant's voice dipped, somber now. In other news, the convicted serial killer, Laura Levy. Nick stiffened. He knew the name. Everyone did. The nurse who murdered 13 children. The trial had paralysed the nation, igniting debates about justice, morality, and whether death was too lenient. She was found dead in her cell this morning, Grant continued, his tone edged with grave finality. Multiple stab wounds. Authorities suspect fellow inmates carried out the act. No inquiry will proceed. Nick exhaled sharply through his nose. There was no justice in what she had done, but nor in the blood-soaked end she had met. It was vengeance masquerading as balance. It left him unsettled, a hollow ache gnawing at him. But before his thoughts could spiral further, the bulletin lurched again, this time into chaos. The broadcast cut mid-sentence, replaced by a shrill alert tone, the kind designed to seize attention, to freeze movement. Conversations died mid-breath. Laughter faltered. Heads turned toward the nearest screens. Luke Grant's voice returned, louder now, the urgency undeniable. Breaking news just in. Reports are coming through that a passenger train travelling through Hertfordshire has been hijacked by operatives of the terrorist organisation known as the Black Death. The words detonated across the concourse. Gasps spread like sparks through dry tinder. The flow of people stuttered. Some clutched at phones, others simply froze, eyes glued to the monitors overhead. On screen, shaky drone footage flickered to life. Grainy images of a train snaking through the countryside, its roof marred by the black hulls of aircraft, latched like leeches to its carriages. Another feed replaced it. CCTV from inside. Nick's pulse spiked. Windows shattered as robotic soldiers forced their way in, sleek frames gleaming, synthetic voices barking orders in tones stripped of humanity. Passengers screamed, huddled into corners, hands raised. A woman sobbed uncontrollably, clinging to her child. Fear filled every pixel of the footage. And then Nick saw him. Connor. His friend sat stiffly, eyes darting, lips pressed thin. He was trying to look composed, but Nick could read him too well. The fear was there, in the way his hands curled into fists against his knees, in the way his gaze flicked desperately for escape that didn't exist. The sight twisted Nick's insides, turned his blood molten. Grant's voice thundered on. Leading the assault is Leonard Payne, once hailed a war hero of the Grand War, now branded a traitor. Once a decorated commander of the Conservative Alliance Party of America, Payne defected and rose within the Black Death. His betrayal has left scars across continents. Nick's hands curled into fists so tight his knuckles whitened. Leonard Payne, he'd read the name in William's database, a man whose fall from grace was studied in military history like a cautionary tale. A hero turned parasite. Honor abandoned for chaos. And now Payne was here, holding his best friend hostage. Nick's vision narrowed, the roar of the station receding until there was only the thundering of his heart. The rage boiling inside him wasn't reckless. It was focused, crystalline. Connor wasn't just another victim on a screen. He was family. He was the anchor Nick couldn't afford to lose. The crowd around him buzzed with fear, with questions, with helplessness. Authorities would take time. Protocol would drag its feet. Politicians would posture. But Nick couldn't wait. The Black Death had made this personal. Soon, Nick's phone buzzed, jolting him from the storm of thoughts clawing through his mind. The vibration felt sharper than usual, as though it carried weight. He fumbled it from his pocket, eyes locking on the message, flashing across the screen. I have you on the camera. Go to the staff room in front of you before Xerxes orders everyone to evacuate. I'll be waiting outside the station. Cover your face before you open the door. Captain G. Before Nick could even tap the screen, the message vanished, erased without a trace. Not even a draft remained. Clean, surgical, deliberate. His pulse spiked. There was no mistaking that signature. Captain Gina Rhodes. Adrenaline surged through him, setting his muscles taut. He darted a glance around the terminal, mind racing. The station still throbbed with chaos. Commuters clustered in confusion, eyes glued to the overhead monitors broadcasting the hijacking. Xerxes soldiers gripped rifles a little tighter, their disciplined stances betraying a hint of unease. Nobody was looking at him. Nick inhaled deeply, forcing his nerves to steady, and spotted it. A discreet door marked staff only, half hidden beyond a knot of distracted passengers. A quiet exit from the madness. He moved. Every step was calculated, weaving through the crowd with the ease of someone trained to move unseen. The tide of bodies shifted naturally to accommodate him, none the wiser. As he reached the door, he raised his left hand, covering his face the way Gina had instructed, before easing it open and slipping inside. The world changed the moment the door clicked shut behind him. Gone was the clamour of King's Cross. Inside, the lighting was dim and tinted yellow, throwing soft, heavy shadows across lockers, discarded jackets, and half-drunk mugs of tea left on tables. Silence pressed down on the room. Too thick, too deliberate. Nick froze, his instincts screaming. Then he saw them. Rail staff lay slumped over the brake tables. Some sprawled across the floor in awkward positions. For a heartbeat, he thought they were dead. His chest clenched. Then he noticed the subtle rise and fall of their chests, the faint wheeze of unconscious breaths. Anesthetic gas. Nick's gut twisted as the realization hit. It must have been pumped through the vents. Non-lethal, but efficient. His urgency deepened, every second now feeling stolen. He picked his way forward with care, slipping between the slumped bodies without so much as brushing a sleeve. His footsteps were soundless, his breathing shallow. The air tasted faintly sweet, a chemical tang that made his tongue prickle. At the far end of the room stood another door. He grasped the handle, turned it slowly, and eased it open. A cool draft washed over him as he slipped through, shutting it firmly behind him to keep the gas sealed in. The corridor beyond hummed with low mechanical noise. Bare pipes ran along the walls, condensation dripping rhythmically, the scent of iron and oil clinging to the air. Tension hung like a wire strung too tight. "You got the captain's message then?" The voice cut through the silence, calm and deliberate. Nick spun right, fists instinctively clenched. Barry Jones stepped out from the shadows by a wall of exposed piping, his lean frame half silhouetted in the dim light. In one hand he held the cap to a valve, which he screwed into place with steady precision before dusting his fingers off against his trousers. His face was composed, expressionless, almost cold, but his eyes carried the sharp, unwavering focus of someone utterly in control. "You can take your hand down," Barry added, tilting his chin. "The gas doesn't reach this corridor." Sealed the vents myself. Nick exhaled and lowered his arm, the tension in his shoulders loosening by degrees. "Did you do that to them? Are they going to be all right?" Barry gave a small shrug, as if the question was already answered. "They'll wake up fine. Gas wears off in 5 minutes. No headaches, no damage. Just a nap they didn't ask for." His tone was flat, professional, with no hint of apology. Nick studied him, unsettled by the casual efficiency. "And then what?" "Then Xerxes sweeps in, sees a room of unconscious staff, and starts the evacuation." Barry's lips tightened in a wry half-smile. "Exactly the distraction we need." "So where's Gina?" Nick asked, his voice low but tight with anticipation as he and Barry moved briskly through the dim service corridor. Their footsteps echoed against the concrete walls, the rhythm of their pace amplified by the silence that pressed in on all sides. Barry didn't answer immediately. He gestured ahead toward what seemed to be a dead-end platform swallowed in shadow. The air grew warmer as they drew closer, a faint shimmer rising from the tracks like a mirage. Nick squinted into the gloom. "I don't see anything." "Wait for it," Barry murmured, a flicker of amusement tugging at the corner of his mouth. The air wavered, distorted like heat haze, and then reality itself seemed to peel back. A sleek craft bled into existence, its outline sharpening from ghostly shimmer to solid steel. Nick's breath caught. His eyes widened as the cloak of advanced optics dissolved, revealing the angular, predatory form of a T-52 Harpy Viv TOL, engineered by Nimbus X Engineering. The Harpy was every inch a weapon of war masquerading as shadow. nearly 60 feet of reinforced fuselage with wings capable of unfurling to a span wider than a city street. Its body was sculpted with lethal precision. Sleek aerodynamic lines feeding into the brutal efficiency of a war machine designed for speed, stealth, and overwhelming force. Twin miniguns jutted from the nose, their barrels glinting faintly in the low light. Beneath the wings, pods bristled with guided missiles, 24 per rack, each capable of tearing apart armour, aircraft, or anything unfortunate enough to be marked as hostile. Above, a rail-mounted anti-missile cannon swiveled in smooth arcs, already scanning the skies like a hawk anticipating prey. The whole machine radiated menace and grace in equal measure, a predator born from both battlefield necessity and engineering obsession. Then came the hiss of hydraulics. The side hatch snapped open, releasing a brief rush of cold air that tugged at Nick's jacket. "Well, don't just stand there, you two," barked a sharp voice. "Get a move on." Nick's chest tightened in recognition. Captain Gina Rhodes stood in the doorway, braced against the frame. One hand gripped the hatch, the other gesturing them aboard with no-nonsense urgency. Even here, with the engines purring like a storm about to break, her presence cut sharper than steel. Nick and Barry broke into a sprint across the tarmac, the low hum of the Harpy's engines swelling into a steady, bone-deep vibration. Heat from the thrusters washed over them in waves, carrying the smell of scorched metal and ozone. They leapt aboard, boots clanging against the reinforced decking, and Gina yanked the hatch closed with a resounding slam. "Welcome aboard the Harpy, Nick," she said curtly, buckling herself into a harness by the side window. Her tone was cool, efficient, but her eyes flicked over him with the faintest trace of approval. Nick swallowed the adrenaline still clawing at his throat and forced a steady reply. "Thanks, Captain." "Good to see you again." His words carried an edge of nervous energy. He was ready, but his blood was still racing. Gina gave a short nod, then turned toward the cockpit. "All right, Artyom. Zeus is on board. Let's get airborne and intercept that train." "Da, Captain," came the pilot's reply, his Russian accent gravelly but sure. Artyom's silhouette was framed by the cockpit glow, his gloved hands flying across a constellation of switches and holographic panels. He didn't look back. Didn't need to. His focus was absolute. The Harpy stirred beneath them, thrusters rumbling as though a beast woken from slumber. The vibration rolled through the cabin, rattling harnesses and metal fixtures. With a rising whine, the VTOL lifted clear of the tracks, the landing skids tucking neatly into its belly. Through the portholes, the platform fell away. The station roof blurred past, and then open sky. Artyom angled the controls, and the vertical thrusters roared, transitioning into forward flight. The Harpy surged ahead, climbing into the winter air with Predator's grace. Clouds split before it, cityscape tilting away into streaks of grey and chrome. Nick pressed back into his seat, fingers tightening around the harness straps. His mind wasn't on the ascent, nor on the firepower surrounding him. It was on a single image, Connor's face on that screen, wide-eyed and trying not to break. Every second mattered now. The Harpy screamed forward, its destination locked. A hijacked train tearing through Hertfordshire, where innocent lives and Nick's best friend hung in the balance.